Hey everybody, Nick Espinosa, your chief security fanatic here. Don't forget to subscribe. Today, I want to talk about an AI bubble that is basically forming and it's coming. And I think this is actually a real important one here, especially when we're talking about the greater tech industry as a whole. Now, Rob Weil of NBC had a pretty good write up on this, so we're going to use him as a primer. But quite frankly, I think this is important. And think about the circular logic here of what is actually happening. NVIDIA, the massive chip maker, plans on investing in OpenAI, maker of ChatGPT, one of the leaders in this industry. OpenAI is buying cloud computing platform from Oracle. Oracle is buying chips from NVIDIA, which has a stake in CoreWeave. And CoreWeave is providing artificial intelligence infrastructure to OpenAI. That's circular logic. And some of these partnerships are now worth hundreds of billions of dollars, and taken together, they have basically vastly increased the company's values, helping obviously the US stock indexes just in general just raise and continue to raise. But as AI investing grows more insular like this, there's also a risk that the money flowing between these companies is essentially creating a mirage for growth, aka a bubble. And if this trend accelerates, some analysts are warning that a weak link here could threaten the viability of the whole industry, leaving basically a huge issue for the US economy. Quote, the experience of a quarter of a century ago when the dot-com bubble burst won't necessarily be repeated, but the scale of recent investment increases by tech firms already indicates that they are taking significant risks. That's according to analysts at Oxford Economics. So it's basically starting to become clear that AI productivity gains and thus return on investment could be limited or delayed. And I quote that report again, a sharp correction in tech stocks with negative knock-ons for the real economy would be very likely. And so that's the primer on this. But I want to put this in plain English, and I want to get to the real core of this issue here. So think about it this way. Essentially, what we are talking about here is having the same money circulate among just these few companies rather than dispersing it to the wider economy. The net effect of that is multifold. So smaller competitors like AI startups, independent cloud providers, semiconductor firms, all this kind of stuff won't be able to compete with this because they don't have access to that level of capital, or the infrastructure is locked within essentially that same circle. And here we go. That concentration leads to basically what's called oligopolistic behavior. I had to look that one up because I knew there was a term for it, where essentially what that means is a few players effectively set prices and terms for compute, cloud access, and AI services. Think about this from a political standpoint. If a society, basically like an autocracy, has oligarchs, you have one oligarch, one person running the gas and oil company, one running healthcare, et cetera, et cetera. They are potentially creating this in the tech industry. But here's the downside to them, though, is that it also makes them more fragile, which means it could have long-term effects for the economy. So let's say one of these companies has some kind of disruption. So NVIDIA faces a chip shortage, OpenAI starts getting very heavily regulated by the US government, which I don't see happening, something like that. The entire loop feels the shock, right? Because NVIDIA can't supply the chips, OpenAI can't supply the AI, et cetera, et cetera. So the issue with that is that there's no diversification. All of these entities are exposed to each other's operational and financial risks. And so it becomes a basically too interconnected to fail kind of infrastructure here, which is very similar to the 2008 financial bubbles, right? Where internal investments were amplifying systemic collapse. They were giving people like $700,000 home loans with terrible credit, and then they were taking those loans, bundling them together, and then selling them like on the stock market as like high risk investments or something like that. And the whole thing just collapsed in and on itself. I'm not an expert on that field, so if somebody knows something more about that, please feel free to correct me. And I should also point this out as well. Because these firms are both suppliers and investors, they will or may favor deals that reinforce their control rather than fostering innovation. They might restrict market access for new entrants that don't align with their investment interests or values. They could channel R&D resources towards proprietary or vertically integrated products rather than open standards that the rest of us could potentially adopt if we're getting into the business. And over time, this essentially slows the pace of real innovation and locks customers into closed ecosystems as well. This is also bad, for the record, for our pocketbooks, because if they've got basically massive dominance with this circular system, they can start inflating prices across all companies. Chips get more expensive, AI gets more expensive, infrastructure gets more expensive, et cetera, et cetera. And so basically, when we're looking at high prices for GPUs, AI hosting, and all of that, it becomes untenable. Startups, research institutions, and even governments basically may pay those inflated rates to access the same infrastructure as this circular competition standard has. So it leads to what's called a cost push inflation in the broader tech economy, especially in cloud and AI-driven services. And for the record, this doesn't even include things like antitrust considerations by various governments, including here in the United States, which I don't see that happening with them anytime soon, but you never know. And so I think this is a big issue, because we could be shaping up to have like the tech boom, and then the bubble burst back in like the late 90s, early 2000s. We may be walking into something else like this. And then when you add all of the other societal forces that are happening right now, we've got conflicts going on in the world that are dragging countries into it. Think Russia, Ukraine, China, Taiwan, some of the others as well. And even the United States is looking like they're going to basically be taking ports and airfields from Venezuela as well. So this is a really interesting time to basically be creating essentially a circular economy in artificial intelligence, when artificial intelligence is blowing up around the world. I think what's happening here is these companies have banded together to basically create that internal supply chain to see if they can dominate the entire planet for this. And the real question is, can they? Because we've also seen things like DeepSeek come out of China, where for a mere fraction of the cost, they have put out an artificial intelligence that is being now used around the world and is being used for free. You can go to GitHub and download it yourself. Biases aside, Chinese control aside, the point is that there are disruptions that can happen to this. But if they continue to grow in this manner, it may not even be a DeepSeek or something like that that may have the issue. And remember, DeepSeek, when it came out that day, when they pushed out that new one, I think it was version 3, there was $1 trillion US of market cap loss across the entire global economy. That's how important AI is. And so we're going to see what happens here, but I think this is a big one. And quite frankly, we're going to see what happens, but I think if they continue to go this way, they may be the dominant player, or they may completely collapse on us. We're about to find out. And please like, share, follow me here on Facebook and Twitter at NickAESP, and please feel free to subscribe to me at YouTube as well. And as always, stay safe, stay online, and please, 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 remember to stay private, informed, and secure. Take care.